Midwives and midwife students, hello, good evening. Um, I'm sending this out just almost in. I didn't plan to do this. This is not a plan to talk. This is me. These are slides that I made for a conference a while back. Um, and I feel like I've been wanting to just send out the message, particularly on gestational diabetes and like the resources that I feel like a lot of people are not familiar with. I just had 11 prenatals in a row. I don't know why I'm choosing to do this at the end of the day, but I'm feeling pretty motivated right now to just speak on this because I know so many people have questions and I feel like I keep repeating the same thing over and over. So I was like, why don't I just record something, send it out if people have more questions. I really would love to build a class around this. So what these slides are based on is really, so hi, my name is Yolandi. If you don't know me, this is me. I am a licensed midwife. I've also been a functional dietitian for a really long time. Originally, my original license is as a dietitian, but my current practice is more as a naturopath. The practice that I have online, aside from being a midwife, is a very naturopathic focused, systems-based approach to functional medicine. So focusing on different systems to rebalance things. Um, this is a test. So these couple of slides are based on a test that I love to run in my functional practice. I also find it very helpful in pregnancy. The reason why I became a midwife is because I wanted to expand my functional medicine in fertility and women's health through to postpartum. That was my main goal for becoming a midwife and getting into obstetrics, was really just to be able to do it all. And to be able to integrate functional health into midwifery practice. So I know that we're not thinking about, and I can hear one specific person that I've worked with say, like, I don't work with sick people. I don't want to work with sick people. I'm a midwife. Yes, we are keeping low risk clients low risk. But that is kind of just my big passion. Like, probably bigger than anything else is being able to mitigate certain complications based on the things that we can see underlying. So what's fascinating to me is that we are very familiar with, I'm going to particularly focus a little bit more on gestational diabetes and like protocols out there and resources that people are not familiar with, resources in the functional world that could be more accessible to you as a midwife, and why it is valuable. So in the conventional world, we know that we would probably be focusing on looking at an HbA1c in the first trimester. That's probably we feel like that's the best that we're doing to know where we're going in terms of blood glucose. If you're not doing HbA1c in the first trimester, that's probably a good idea. That's like the minimum you can do for your clients to know, are they coming in with insulin resistance? Are they coming in with type 2 diabetes? Are they coming in with pre-diabetes? What are they coming in with? Instead of looking at something at 28 weeks and then being like, oh, this has been here all this time. We didn't know. We could have worked on this for 28 weeks already. Probably like 20 weeks to be more realistic. 20 weeks is a big time to work on insulin resistance if someone's coming into pregnancy with that. But something that I want to throw out there is, you've probably also seen this in practice, that even if someone does come in to practice with a HbA1c of 5.2, 5.3, it doesn't mean that they don't end up failing that glucose test. And that's a whole nother story, and I should really make a class. And if I get enough responses from this, and I feel like people, it was like my iron class. I have an iron class out there, but people really had to push me to record it and to get it out there. I love teaching, but man, when I make slides, it can take me years to put something together. And I know I should probably just write a book, but I want to perfect it. I want to give you so much information. At the end of the day, it is a book, and it just is too much. I'm going to try to keep it brief. Probably won't be. But the point is, I want you to know that there are other resources that you could offer your clients. People who've had preeclampsia in previous pregnancies, people who've had gestational diabetes, people who've had previous preterm births, or like, prom. Those things are all based on something that we call oxidative stress, right? And people would probably be thinking, well, as a midwife, why the heck would how do I know? How do I know how is that tangible to me? Welcome to the organic acids test. I really like to do this in the very first trimester. We know that pregnancy influences a lot of things. So I like to look at all my basic things, iron, HbA1c, all of those things. I really like to look at it in the first trimester when most things are still pretty normal for the most part. Obviously, there is some variation to normal there, but there's a lot of changes in pregnancy. So I don't particularly run organic acids later in pregnancy unless it's for insulin resistance or something like that. So that's what I'm going to focus on a little bit here, but I also want to show you the other valuable portions of this. And granted, this is not a test that you are probably going to run and interpret and treat. Firstly, if you're a certified professional midwife, you probably are limited to management and not treatment. As nurse midwives, you probably could do some of the treatment. This is just a test that's really complex. You could learn it for sure. This is my favorite thing on earth. So I absorb it every second moment that I have to myself. This is my spare time. You are also just welcome to refer clients to me, or work something out with me. If you wanted to do this in first trimester, I'm happy to review these labs and then say, okay, we should probably work on this, or it looks good. It looks good. It's a screening program. It's a screening test that you can use in the beginning of pregnancy to kind of look at all of these things: methylation, insulin resistance, oxidative stress, inflammation, and then obviously amino acid levels. This is what this test was made for. Do those things not sound like pregnancy? Like, these are all the things that we want to know in pregnancy. Honestly, this is a complex test, but this is what it's based on. So in terms of organic acids, and because everybody here is a midwife, you might understand this a little bit if you've looked into the tests that we do as healthcare providers when we test for new inborn errors of metabolism in newborns. This is what we're looking at. We're looking at organic acids that are off. So what it's really focused on, and I don't think you can see the marker. I've done this recording before and you can't see the marker. Anyway, basically all of those little steps that you see in there, this is the Krebs cycle. It's the citric acid cycle. It's the energy production cycle inside of the mitochondria. So basically, if you had to look at the very first thing, usually you're going to start with carbohydrates. That's going to be the substrate. That substrate has to be broken down to pyruvate. So that might be the first thing that it starts with here is pyruvate at the top there. Pyruvate has to go through a couple of steps. It has to go to coenzyme A. That coenzyme A has to go into a citric acid cycle that then needs to create ATP, right? So from every one pyruvate, you get a certain amount of ATP, depending on how well your mitochondria are working. So this is complex, but the point of this test is the fact that you can see on this test every single one of those steps. You can kind of see the health of every one of those steps. Every one of those steps is going to have obviously the step itself going from a substrate from A to B. So it's going to tell you something about A and it's going to tell you something about B. If pyruvate is building up, that means that it cannot go to the next thing. So that is telling us something. Does it need a cofactor? Is there a genetic SNP in there? So every single one of these steps is actually measured in this organic acids test, which is also what like what we call a PKU test, a inborn errors of a newborn screening. That's what they're testing for as well. They're testing for urea cycle disorders and all of these things. We can use this same test. This test was invented by Richard Lord, who actually was in Texas. He did all his studying in Texas. He came up with this test for adults. And obviously these are not fatal things that they would be for newborns, but it still screens, it's really effective at looking at certain pathways, biochemical pathways that are just a little faulty or a lot faulty in adults that can make a really big difference. People who have a urea cycle disorder, which may not have been picked up at birth because it's not fatal, it's not that high, but as an adult, you're creating a lot of ammonia that you're not clearing. So that's a detox issue. So infertility, that's obviously something that we want to work on. It looks at methylation. So, and this is another big thing I want to focus on at some other point in time. But just as a brief thing right now, I know that midwives have come across the MTFHR thing. It's kind of a buzzword. Everybody knows that if you have MTFHR, if you have the MTFHR, then you need more folate. And Yes, you do. But without looking at the organic acids, you are only looking at the you're only looking at the actual gene. You're not looking at the expression. You're looking at the genotype, not the phenotype. The phenotype is the expression of that gene. You could have a double MTHFR mutation and be not expressing that at all. You could not be expressing that mutation. I know it sounds crazy, but I'll show you some labs. This might be longer than I intended, but here you go, biochemistry rabbit hole. Welcome to me. So this is another thing that if you want to look at methylation, please look at this test, because you cannot just look at someone's genetic 23andMe. Okay, so what? You have the gene. Is this an issue for you in your body? Are you expressing? Is this switched on? This is what this test shows you. There are 2 markers for methylation in here. There's more than that, but for what you mostly probably know, what I can see from what people understand, people are mostly looking at B12 and folate being the big thing. But if folate is not actually an issue, then methylation might not be, or there might be a different issue, because methylation is a massive construct. It is not only B12 and folate. There is like the sulfur amino acids. There's so much more that goes into methylation. Methionine, homocysteine. There's so many more things that go into methylation than just B12 and folate. So this is a way that you could see, is B12 and folate part of the issue here, or are they other methylation issues? So that's a little bit beyond what I want to talk about today. I basically just want to let you know that this is a great resource. So just as an example here, what I'm trying to say with methylation, if somebody has either only one SNP, right? So they have the 677T SNP just on one side of the gene, that would be a heterozygous SNP. If they have a homozygous SNP, that means they have the mutation on both sides of the gene. That should be a lot worse. And you should technically have 70% less efficiency of that enzyme. However, that's the genotype. You're not necessarily expressing the phenotype. This is where you see the phenotype. So again, you can't see my cursor, but on the I guess on the screen, oh God, I'm so bad with left and right, bangle side. On the right side of the screen, the heterozygous, just look at the heterozygous. I don't know, left and right, not my strong point. The heterozygous patient, you can see that these are very different labs, right? So the heterozygous patient is the patient that had only one SNP. So you would imagine that they actually have more of an efficiency of their MTHFR gene. But you can see how high this methylmalonic acid is basically looking at like how efficiently is your body using B12. So this is the expression of that gene. You can see it's in the red. It's really not high. It's building up. It's not actually doing a good job. Same with the FIGLU. The FIGLU is the one that you're actually looking for in terms of folate metabolism. Again, it's in the higher range. Methylation is not doing well for this client, for this patient. Homozygous, however, a patient who has both SNPs on both sides, is actually doing pretty okay. They're on the lower side of both of those. Could it be that they're not taking in enough? It's probably, it could be likely. It could be likely. But if it's in the green, just for clarity's sake for this test, they're actually doing better than if it is in the red, right? So this is just a simple example of genotype and phenotype in terms of methylation. Don't just look at a patient and be like, oh, yep, you have an MTHFR, you better be on like so much more folate. Everyone can benefit from folate, but you could over-methylate people as well, right? There can be an over-methylation of this cycle. There could also be other issues in the methylation cycle other than folate. So that's all I want to say about that right now before I get deep into a rabbit hole. In terms of insulin resistance, this is kind of what I want to focus on tonight, because I feel like people are, I'm on a lot of birth pages and forums and stretching from South Korea, South Africa, Europe, here. I just read a lot of things that people are asking questions and other people are answering. And the main thing I want to say is that this is so, at this point in time, this is so much more than people needing to cut out potatoes and bread and pasta. I promise you, this is so much more. Will those things help? Absolutely. It will help any human to have more nutrient dense foods compared to nutrient deficit foods, whatever the English word for that is. But this is a deeper biochemistry that have I guess we don't have to understand it. I shouldn't be that pretentious about it. But we have to have the awareness that this goes deeper in biochemistry, right? I have had gestational diabetic clients referred to me that are on zero extra nutritional supplementation to increase these pathways. So this is not only about, if we're thinking about gestational diabetes, we are looking at insulin resistance. We have to ask ourselves, is it really the sugar that I'm taking in, or is it the fact that I'm not optimizing the sugar that I'm taking in? Sugar meaning like any carbohydrates, from a carrot to a Coca-Cola, right? Definitely different carbohydrates, definitely metabolized differently, but at the end of the day, they are broken down to a glucose. Every single one of them is broken down to exactly the same thing. For some people, they can cut out all the Coca-Cola, all the ice cream, all the pasta, and they will still have a fasting glucose of 110, 120. It wouldn't cut it. This is where we're looking at here. Now, I also want to backtrack, and I know this is why I need to make a class, but some of you might be familiar with the fact that if you're dealing with someone who has failed the glucose test, someone who has higher fastings, you want to firstly troubleshoot, because it can be one of two issues, right? And I was just talking to somebody about this today, I guess, which is why I feel motivated to talk about this right now. You can have one of two issues. The one issue is that so the one's called a dawn phenomenon, and the one's called a Somogyi effect. The dawn phenomenon doesn't matter which one we look at first. Either you're having a rebound hyperglycemia. That means that throughout the night, fasting, there's too much fasting. And I see this a lot with people who have their postprandials, the after meals are pretty okay. But then when it comes to fasting in the morning, and have like 120 fastings, then you think to yourself, well, you don't really have an issue handling the glucose. Is that really the issue? Could it be that you're just fasting too long throughout the night? And this is basic blood glucose control troubleshooting, right? Are you fasting too long throughout the night so that your body at some point, usually around 3 a.m., does not have enough glucose? So if you had to test glucose at 3 a.m., it would probably be low 60s, maybe lower than that, probably in the 60s. Your body will over-respond to that. Glucagon from the liver will be pumped into the bloodstream way more than it needs to, because it wants to really make sure that you stay alive. And that is where you get that rebound hyperglycemia at 6, 7, 8 a.m. That fasting glucose is going to be much higher because it's rebounding from a hypoglycemia. So the very first thing you want to do is troubleshoot at 3 a.m. Reading to see where are we at 3 a.m. Because the nutritional strategy is very different. The other one, if it's not a rebound hyperglycemia, it's going to just be a steady climb in glucose, right? That's just the dawn phenomenon. It's just going to be a steady climb. There's never going to be a hypoglycemia at 3 a.m. It's just going to be either a normal, it's going to be normal, or it might even be high by 3 a.m. and then it's just going to climb after that. That is going to be more of a actual insulin resistance, right? Firstly, you have to counsel and educate your clients on regulating their blood sugar throughout the day, right? Starting with breakfast, starting with a really good protein breakfast. Like I have just right throughout life, like clients in general, not just pregnancy people, but starting your day off with good protein, 2 eggs, a high protein yogurt, and collagen. That's 50 grams of protein with breakfast. That's great. Now you only have about 50 to 100 to go for the rest of the day, right? Start your body off with protein in the morning, because it's going to help you regulate that blood glucose. So first, troubleshoot those things. If they're just eating one meal in the day, don't expect anything to be great. If they're eating barely anything, you have to get the basics in order. You have to make sure that there is 25 to 30 grams of protein at least 4 times a day, spread through the day, right? If you still have an issue then with that morning, then you want to troubleshoot. Is it what's happening at the 3 a.m. reading? Is it Is it a hyperglycemia? Is it a hypoglycemia? If it's a hypoglycemia, that's a pretty easy fix. You just get a bigger snack in at midnight, and that sometimes you have to play around with. I mean, when people are referred to me, that it usually takes like 2 weeks to a month to really play around with things, because you have to like wait for every night, to like get a new reading and be like, okay, tomorrow let's take another sweet potato. Let's lessen the sweet potato. Let's add some of this to, let's add some honey to this. You have to really play around with certain calories later on at night to be able to get the right balance. If people are on medication, I had a client recently that was referred to me, and she was on glyburide. I don't know why people are still on glyburide, because what it does is that it really does cause hyperglycemia. Anyway, I'm not going to get on that soapbox right now. But at the end of the day, you might have to correct some of these hypos that are resulting from hypers. It's kind of an irregular pattern. So they're taking medication that's going to be a little bit more tricky. I'd say just refer them. I'm happy to look at those things for you. But in general, before you get to medication, like you really just want to look at that 3 a.m. reading, because if it is hypo, then it's a kind of an easy fix. You just don't let them go hypo. Just put some more food in later in the night. Have them have a good protein snack with some carbohydrates at midnight. Then you might need to set an alarm and do that. Something that works is like a core power, or like any kind of protein shake. Like obviously the quality is important. A non-denatured protein is always going to be better. But anyway, if it's not a rebound hyperglycemia, then you're looking at that dawn. You're just kind of steadily climbing. And that is going to be a little bit more, that's going to be a bigger supplementation regimen. And this is where we look at what does it take for, because right here, I wish you could see the cursor, but in the middle, you'll see the carbohydrate. That carbohydrate needs to go down to pyruvic acid. That pyruvic acid needs to go to acetyl coenzyme A. And interestingly enough, I just want to put this out there because a lot of people don't know this, but if you look at this coenzyme A in the middle, you can see the beta oxidation on the side. The little circle on the right-hand side is beta oxidation. That is your fat burning capacity, right? I also want to show you that the coenzyme A can also go to ketogenesis. There's another place, and I don't think it's showing you here. Maybe it doesn't show you. Or maybe it does at the bottom. Anyway, coenzyme A can make many things besides going to the citric acid cycle. If you are not able to push carbohydrates through pyruvate and acetyl coenzyme and into the citric acid cycle, what most of the time happens is that acetyl coenzyme A actually becomes cholesterol. And that cholesterol eventually becomes CoQ10. So long road there, but if you see a client with higher cholesterol, high pyruvate, you know that there's an issue in this pathway, right? You don't have to test your clients for cholesterol. I'm not saying, because it won't always show up right away, but it is one of those things that high cholesterol is actually not treated with anything that's related to fat. It's got nothing to do with dietary fat. It's got everything to do with dietary carbohydrate intake that is insulin resistant, right? It is, when you put these key points together, it's fascinating. It's life. It's everything. So in this pathway from carbohydrates down to pyruvic acid to acetyl coenzyme A, this is where we can see the insulin resistance in the organic acids test. If either this pyruvic acid or the lactate had to build up, it means that the substrate is not being pushed through to acetyl coenzyme A. And that's where we bring in just a lot more magnesium, a lot more B1, B3, B6, lipoic acid, chromium. That's my very first go-to with gestational diabetes, or just insulin resistance, that, fast things that are too high. A lot more magnesium, glycinate. Don't mess with the other ones. Glycinate, that glycine, that chelated to the glycine is really magical. Magnesium glycinate, B1, and when we say B1, B3, it's like 100 to 200 milligrams of each of these. People might have genetic SNPs in here, because otherwise their prenatal would have just done the job. Like I look at these tests all the time, and the amount of B6 that people need. Normally you would look, if you look this up, B6, you actually don't want to take more than 100 milligrams, because you could have some neuropathy and nerve damage from that. I have people on 300, 400 milligrams of this, because they have a genetic predisposition that just prevents them from using that all that B6. So you really have to push that enzyme to work. So that's usually the thing, like a couple of hundred, like I would say, like start with 100 milligrams of, B6, B1, B3. Then you want to go to chromium, lipoic acid, 600 milligrams at least twice a day. So there's a couple of things there that you really want to first throw in there to help that first part of the insulin resistance. Okay. And I feel like that's the part as midwives that you could implement in your practice, those supplementations. And maybe I'll send that with the email. I'll send the protocol with the email. You'll get a free protocol. But if that doesn't work, let me tell you what the next issue could be. And this is where we come to oxidative stress. And this is why we all know, we learn about it, we see it, but do we really understand it? Okay. So when you are actually making ATP, so when you're looking at, sorry, I have to come so close to the screen. If you look at the citric acid, succinic acid, when you're looking at, you're going like, around in circles, and there's just ATP being produced all the time. I'm going to say something complicated, but it's profound. When it comes to methylation, there's something that's more important than methylation in the body. And that is glutathione production. If you're not familiar with glutathione, you should look up glutathione. Glutathione is the be-all, end-all master antioxidant in the human body, right? Without glutathione, every single mitochondria will just kill themselves because the oxidative stress will be too much. So every single time an ATP is created in this citric acid cycle, for every ATP, you're making a ton of oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is not necessarily something that we're getting from, heavy metals and like pollution. Absolutely, that contributes. But for the main part, just me sitting here talking to you very passionately is creating a lot of energy. That energy is creating oxidative stress. If we do not have enough glutathione to handle that oxidative stress, this entire cycle will stop. All of this is happening inside of the mitochondria, which are the motor homes of every single cell, ovaries and heart having the most mitochondria. So fertility, definitely an issue. Heart issues, definitely an issue. Like mitochondria, that's your life. If you don't have enough mitochondria, you're not doing good. And that's basically what this test looks at. It also looks at the glutathione production, which is a sulfur-containing compound, which draws from sulfur-containing amino acids, N-acetylcysteine. Not so much glycine is, so it's made out of glycine, N-acetylcysteine, and glutamine. So supplementing those things could definitely help the glutathione production. So maybe I'll put that on the protocol for you too. I don't always throw it in right away. But CoQ10 is something that helps. When you see this phosphorylation at the bottom here, this is kind of where I don't want to go too deep into this, but this is where all the oxidative stress happens and is mitigated. If there's too much oxidative stress in that bottom portion where you can see like all the purple circles, that's where your CoQ10 is recirculated the entire time to mitigate that oxidative stress. If that is not happening, if you don't have enough CoQ10, people on statins have no CoQ10 because statins block CoQ10 production. Not that you have a lot of people on statins in pregnancy, just for whatever random fact, that is what it is. But that bottom piece here is basically where all the oxidative stress happens. If you do not have enough glutathione, the first thing that's going to happen is your body is going to switch off methylation. The reason that happens is because it cannot actually produce glutathione and methylate. It cannot methylate and produce glutathione at the same time. It will choose one or the other. Glutathione is definitely more important than methylation. So this is another portion where people are like, oh, methylation, folate. You know what's more important than that? Glutathione. Making sure that your patient has enough glutathione, because if they don't have enough glutathione, nothing's going to help the methylation. Your body is just going to be like, absolutely not dealing with that right now. We have these things over here that are not doing well, and this is our first priority. It does not matter how much magnesium, how much B12, how much B1, how much B3, how much chromium, how much lipoic acid you give. If there is too much oxidative stress, what's going to happen is that every single one of those mitochondria will apoptose. They will kill themselves because there is no protection against oxidative stress. They are very sensitive. They have very, very sensitive cell membranes. When those cell membranes are damaged by oxidative stress, they evaporate. They go. There, there is a. It's possible for you to have way less mitochondria than you should have. It's the big difference between a 2-year-old and a 50-year-old. That's the big difference in energy production, is the fact that a 2-year-old has all their mitochondria. A 50-year-old has gotten rid of a lot of their mitochondria. But you can imagine in pregnancy and fertility, like, this is a big deal, right? So this test really looks at the mitochondrial health of the individual and individual steps where things are going wrong, either because of cofactors that are not there, either because of cofactors, meaning like the vitamins, B vitamins, lipoic acid, magnesium, like those are cofactors that make those enzymes work. Or it could be a genetic SNP, and just the fact that they just need to push that enzyme a lot more with those cofactors. It definitely goes deeper than this, but when it comes to this, I want to give you this as a resource to use in your clients, because coming back to those clients who come in with an HbA1c of 5.2, 5.3, it means that they have a lower risk, right? But this will show up before the HbA1c gets to 5.6, 5.7, 5.8. This is going to show up before conventional labs pick up on things, because this needs to be happening for a while for, the actual expression of proper insulin resistance. But as we know, pregnancy is a stressor on the body. It's one of the biggest stresses that your body can endure, and it very quickly can ramp this up and show the expression of this. So let's see what else I wanted to tell you in here. So basically my point is, I can send you a protocol for like the basic protocol that you can try. Firstly, you need to troubleshoot your 3 a.m.s, right? Then if you troubleshooted that and it's not a hypoglycemia that becomes a hyperglycemia, then you want to supplement. And this, I usually find this about 2 weeks before it starts working on a metabolic level. So you want to try these supplements. But I will tell you, if you do not see success in that, you definitely want to look at the oxidative stress, because if there's something else going on in the body, I run GI maps all the time because there are gut infections, H. pylori, just things happening that people have no idea of, right? Like, this is my favorite thing, is to combine functional medicine with pregnancy and fertility, because, well, this is the time people are motivated to work on things, but also it helps us prevent certain things. You can't prevent everything. We're not magicians, but really this is like a new resource to use as midwives. And you're not going to want to learn this test. I mean, you definitely can, but you also have to be careful with like treatment, like what you can treat as a practitioner, if you're allowed to treat, what state you're in, all of that. So I'm giving you this as a resource to say that if you want to do these tests in your office, I'm so happy to ship you some tests. You can have them. These are $185 cash pay. There are other ones that can go through insurance, but it's still going to be a copay of $180. So I really just run this in pregnancy, early on in pregnancy. You can see oxidative stress levels, right? You can see DNA damage. If you have a client that you feel like there's definitely something going on in the gut, you can just do a GI map. A GI map is $311 at my cost price. It gives you great information. It gives you where the immune system is at. It gives you like all the commensal bacteria, like in terms of like the good bacteria, what should be there, the pathogenic bacteria, viruses, parasites. Like, I had a client refer to me recently, and she was just really iron deficient. And so like when people refer to me for iron infusions, and sorry, if any of you, I know a lot of you have referred to me for iron infusions, and I'm a little stuck up about that, but it's just because I'm really passionate about not causing more harm. For a lot of iron deficiency, if it's not a diet related thing, if people are supplementing, if people are eating a good, then we have, because you are not what you eat, you are what you absorb, right? If there are things living in your gut that are absorbing it for you instead of you absorbing it, then that's an issue. That is definitely an issue. And it doesn't matter how much you're supplementing, you're just growing that thing instead of you absorbing that thing. So, having a parasite in there, what's the point of supplementing? You're just growing the parasite, right? These things are really, really valuable to have in a practice where you want to help prevent complications. So with all of this said, the other thing that I'm asked a lot when people refer to me is, should I just refer my clients to you and let them pay? Which I'm happy to do. But what a lot of midwives do is that they just pay me, and it depends on like how often you feel like you would use this. But if you pay me a certain subscription every month, there's different levels. You can either refer 3 clients to me for a certain amount, or you can refer 5 clients to me, or you can refer like unlimited. We can work something out with how much you think you're going to be using this. But at the end of the day, then you can charge for this consult on your side however much you want. So you could make money off of this, right? You can upmarket this on your side like you would a prescription from an NP or whatever, like when you, it's basically like you just add that to their invoice to say, okay, there's a $50 charge for the consult with this functional dietitian. But you could charge them whatever you want. I don't care, right? So that's up to you. You could either refer the client themselves, that's going to cost them a lot more, or you could make it part of their package and charge whatever you want if you want to make money on it. So this is really what I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell you it's so much more than pasta and potatoes. Like if this is working, if this pathway is working, you should be able to handle the potatoes and all of that. The reason why, and I know you probably know this, but for students in here, the reason why in pregnancy we have a bigger issue with this, because I'm saying if this pathway is working, then you shouldn't have an issue with Coca-Cola and potatoes. But the reason why this is an issue in pregnancy is because our metabolisms switch halfway through pregnancy, right? Like the first 20 weeks, we are very much geared at building fat cells for ourselves. So we're using a lot of the glucose. We're actually hypersensitive to glucose in the first 20 weeks. We absorb all of that glucose ourselves to make fat cells, to make cholesterol, to make adipose tissue. And then from 20 weeks onwards, we actually have a natural decrease in sensitivity. So we become slightly insulin resistant so that our metabolism can switch to using more ketones, using more fat cells, and for baby to be getting more of our glucose. Because we can't both feed on the glucose that we're having. Apparently, that's just how it was invented. That's how we were invented. So we naturally have that insulin resistance towards like 20 weeks and onwards. But what makes this worse for people is the oxidative stress, right? And naturally, you just, as a human being breathing and walking around, you have oxidative stress. But now you are also going through a process where you are constantly in an inflammatory state, building a whole new human body. That can be a lot for a lot of people. It could also just be that they came into pregnancy, and this is mostly what it is people come into pregnancy just with that underlying issue of oxidative stress, that maybe their adrenals have been run down and they're just not really functioning as well as they could, right? That's a big thing for people. It could be that they have underlying gut infections that they haven't really dealt with. They've never had gut symptoms. They've never had an issue with gut, so why test it? Well, the gut is the start of everything, according to Hippocrates. And then there's environmental toxins and like metals and all of these things that we don't think about testing before we become pregnant. But because pregnancy is it's the biggest stress test that your body will go through, it brings us to the light. So basically, end all be all, I just wanted to show you that this is more than pasta and, all of that. You definitely need to get all your basics under control for sure. And if you need a good step-by-step protocol to go through clients with, I'm happy to discuss that with you. Schedule a consult with me. I can see how much you know and how much you want to learn. I have a lot of midwives who mentor and like who just who just want to learn. They want to learn, and I'm happy to teach this for sure. I think that this is really, really beneficial to know. Let's just see what else is in these slides. So basically, okay, insulin resistance. This is what we see with the pyruvate and the lactic acid. We also see glycine deficiency. Oh my goodness, how amazing is this? I know this is not what I'm talking about, but a glycine deficiency in pregnancy is it's not optimal. Firstly, because it's one of the 3 components of your glutathione, right? It's one of the 3 amino acids that need to build a glutathione. And I think I think you go through 3 grams, it's either 3 or 30 grams of glutathione a day. But the amount of oxidative stress that you produce on a daily basis, I think, is the same as your body weight. It is immense. It is immense the amount of ATP that you produce on a daily basis. The mass. If you have to take, I have to go and look at this again, but I think the mass of energy that you produce on a daily basis, I'm going to say, is the same as your body weight. Could be more. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Okay, glycine. So apart from glutathione, this is also the building block of hemoglobin, right? Your very first, like when a stem cell is differentiating from a white blood cell into a red blood cell, what it picks up is a glycine. It builds on that glycine in a protoporphyrin ring. So again, when people refer to me for iron deficiency and iron infusions, I'm happy to do iron infusions after 37 weeks, but iron is a toxic. It is a heavy metal. If I'm throwing iron straight into the bloodstream and there's already a lot of oxidative stress in there, you're absolutely feeding that oxidative stress. It is there to be, iron is there to be oxidized. If there's oxidative stress, it is going to add to that. So the very first thing is I look at protein intake, because a lot of the times that is an issue. That's just it's just simple, straightforward protein intake. People think they're getting in enough protein, but they're not. Are they getting in enough glycine? Glycine is so important for 2 major things in pregnancy. So important. This is liver detox. We don't really need to go into this because we don't really focus on this so much that I use a lot in my practice. Just a fun part of this too is polyphenol status, which also contributes to antioxidants, right? Like that is at least what your gut is using for antioxidants inside of the colon. But also, well, I guess here at the bottom, I'm just showing how you see a glycine deficiency. So if your HIP rate's really high and your benzoic acid is normal to low, that shows a glycine deficiency. But you can also actually see the glycine on the test if that's the one you order. I don't really order the amino acids with it because it's only a 24-hour urine amino acid. And it's 225 compared to if you just run the organic acid, it's 185. But polyphenol status is also just a quick way to check, like, hey, are you actually eating the amount of vegetables that you should be eating on a daily basis? Because you tell me you are, but this is what will tell me if you actually are. And this is where we see oxidative stress. So you'll see here this 8-OH2D. This is something that you can go look up. 8-OH2D is a remarkable biomarker for oxidative stress and DNA damage. If you're coming into pregnancy with a high 8-OH2D, there's a lot to work on. Could it be a gut infection? Absolutely. It could be many things. It could be many things that should be figured out, because I don't know that you really want to mess with that throughout, whatever. We want to keep people low risk. Which is why I'm giving you this information. But really, that's what this test looks at, is that oxidative stress. And this is an article about oxidative stress. Okay, and then I told you about methylation and glutathione. Your body always has to choose between, is it going to methylate? Is it going to make glutathione? If it needs to constantly be making glutathione because there's so much oxidative stress, there's going to be no methylation happening. So it doesn't matter how much B6, B12, B folate you take in. If you're trying to prevent a cleft palate by just over supplementing with with folate, you're only going to get that far if there is not enough glutathione to deal in the first place, because it's never going to switch over to methylation. Methylation is building. It is muscle. It mainly is like muscle building, which is a human being. If you're building another human being inside of you, it's a lot of methylation. But it's really like it's the creation of enzymes, proteins, cofactors, anything that's building, that's methylation. It's adding a methyl group to something to build. Okay, glutathione markers, that's the other thing that you get to see on here. You get to see the methionine, which is going to be a big glutathione marker, and the pyroglutamate at the bottom there. There's another test that actually looks at sulfur, and not in pregnancy, but outside of pregnancy, I often see people's glutathione completely collapsed, which means that their mitochondria are going to do nothing until you fix that. Until you fix the glutathione, your mitochondria are not going to produce ATP. It's not going to use carbohydrates for substrate, right? So that is where you could probably benefit from switching over to fat, but that fat still has to go into the Krebs cycle. It's going to go into a beta oxidation, but at the end of the day, that coenzyme A still needs to go in there. You're just not using the carbohydrate as a substrate. That's going kind of into a different direction. But honestly, your mitochondria, if they're not happy, none of this is going to work. And that doesn't, it's going to be really hard to make things. You cannot force that Krebs cycle to actually do its job if the mitochondria are not happy with their environment. Put it simply. Okay, the building blocks, the glutathione we talked about. If you end up ordering the organic acids that also include the amino acids, you can see the amino acids in here. And I will, since you are midwives, I will give you the option that you actually could do both a blood draw as well as the urine. So for my functional practice, I just have people do the urine because it's a telehealth thing. I don't want to have to deal with them having to do the blood draw somewhere. But if you're doing this in office, man, this is amazing, because if it's just a urine amino acid, it's going to be a 24-hour excretion of the amino acid. If it's the blood draw of the amino acid, then it's kind of like a longer term of the existence of that amino acid. So you could look at things like glutamine, glycine, methionine, all of these things, cysteine, all of these things that build glutathione. You can see how much of that building block they actually have, if that's the issue. I mean, usually that is the issue, because that's how I fix things, is I just supplement those things. But you can see, and you can explain this to a client on a little bit of a better idea. So that if you're doing the blood draw with it, it's $225. If you're just sending them home with a urine kit to send back to the lab, that's $185. And tryptophan, oh my goodness, tryptophan. Oh, I could do a whole class and a whole book on tryptophan. Tryptophan is the precursor to melatonin and serotonin. Tryptophan is also the rate limiting step in every single protein that you are building in your body. If you do not have enough tryptophan, none of your proteins are being formed properly. So again, one of these things that we can see in here, you don't necessarily have to look at the tryptophan. There's a lot of other clues you can see from here to see that, the kyurinate pathway isn't doing well, probably stealing from tryptophan. So in terms of, I guess I can mention this here, I don't want to make this too elaborate, but in terms of mental health, in terms of depression, anxiety, oh my goodness, this test is key. I don't necessarily treat that in pregnancy, because we have to use certain things that I'm not very comfortable with using in pregnancy. But there are definitely some things that we can, right? Like tryptophan it's a beautiful supplement to use if you're having sleep issues, if you're having mood issues, all of these things. Tryptophan. Just give someone more tryptophan. But then there are other things, we could play with 5-HTP, but that's a little bit more on an individual basis. I'm not going to just do that as a general recommendation. But for postpartum, this is absolutely key for people who have issues with postpartum or with just anxiety and depression. Tryptophan is not the only thing. Don't get me wrong. Like, there is a whole entire panel for neuroendocrine biomarkers in here that show you things. That's going to show you L-dopamine. It's going to show you your epinephrine, norepinephrine, serotonin. It's going to show you basically your whole profile of the basically where things are going and what's stealing from what, and where you can correct things on a psychological level. So this is part of my very first, outside of pregnancy, this is part of my very first treatment phase. It's just kind of like getting people to feel better so that they are more motivated to do things for the rest of the year when we work on adrenals and gut and all of these things. All right, people. I guess I spent 50 minutes talking about these things. I really am so passionate about this. I would love for you to email me back if you're interested in knowing more about this. I mainly just today wanted to get this message out there because I've had to answer this question numerous times in the last week. And I just want to get the message out there that there's more to it, right? Especially particularly when it comes to insulin resistance, there's so much more to everything. Like this test goes on, and I can, there's a lot to it. It'll take you 30 years to learn all of this, but really at the end of the day, when it comes to insulin resistance, I wanted to give you this as a something that you could use as a screening tool in the beginning of pregnancy, as a biochemistry screening tool. Like, where are you at with things? How can we balance things? This is a very naturopathic way of looking at things, but if you want to contract a naturopath and just like screen everybody in the beginning, wow, you know, that's what we should be. I feel like that's what midwifery should be. We should really just be doing the best that we can. I know people don't want to be too medical, and I know I'm probably on the way more medical side of things, but I love what I do. I really love what I do. At the end of the day, pregnancy is not a sickness. I honestly believe pregnancy is not a sickness. But unfortunately, we live in a world where people do come into pregnancy not at their most healthiest. And then we have to deal with that later on in pregnancy, where we could be dealing with it a little bit earlier on. I also don't know everything. Like, I'm learning new things every year, every month, every day. Like, if I don't learn something new every day, then my day hasn't been complete, especially when it comes to these things. So this is also part of my learning, and I just want to share with you what I am learning and what's working for me and what I'm excited about. So anyway, I'm going to stop now. Please reach out with any questions. If there's any one of these topics that you want a specific class on, please let me know. I do have the iron class. If you want that, I'm happy to send you that at a discount. I recorded it for a conference that was mainly, I felt like it was mainly students. So what I want to do, I said I was going to stop recording, but I have like 9 minutes until I get to an hour, so I might as well finish it. So what I want to do with the iron metabolism class, because iron metabolism in pregnancy is so huge and people don't understand it. It's complex, and I definitely don't understand all of it, but I spend a lot of my time researching it. And eventually I will write a book on it. And I think what I should do, because it's one of those things that I can just go on and on and on with the research and always feel like this class isn't complete. But at this point in time, I think what I should do is I should just go with what I have, give you the information that I have. And then from that, people will ask questions and be like, okay, but what about this? Or have you done this? Or what do you know about this? And then that will motivate me to be like, okay, no, I don't. Let me go research that more. And then so I think what I'll do is more, it's like an expansion pack of the iron deficiencies. So I'm happy to send you the one where I start with kind of like a basic level of what I teach students. And then from the questions that I get in there, I can create the next class and the next class, and we can just kind of build this together. And then eventually I'll just write a book about it. Okay, thank you for entertaining me. Have a lovely day.